Cool, guys. All right. So thanks for coming on. So today's pretty cool. We're going to talk about the contingency periods and how we work in tandem between the loan side and the realtor side, so that we can work together to try to serve the client in the best of our abilities, but just kind of get some of the questions answered so that we can strengthen our offers going in. And we talked a little bit about it in one of our meetings, I think a couple Tuesdays ago. And yeah, so I'm going to share the RPA page 2 and talk about what the normal contingency periods are. I'll let Kim kind of jump on that portion as we review the RPA, and then I'll go into how we look at it on the loan side and what we try to do to isolate the dates, how we count the dates, and then what we're going to be doing to try to shorten those contingency periods and ultimately releasing them. So I'll share my screen and then I'll let Kim take over. Cool, and I'll mute myself. Yep.
All right, guys. So what we kind of wanted to go over today, sorry, I'm actually pulling another RPA up on my second screen so I can see it better. So what we really want to talk about today are, thank you for the highlights, Tony, are the contingencies that are inherent in the RPA and what those mean and how you can use them to basically strengthen your offer. Of course, they can also weaken an offer, but they're there for a reason. They're there to protect the buyer. And what you really want to steer clear of and never do is go too short or take away too many contingencies out the gate, because you just don't know. So looking at this page on our RPA that, majorly addresses all of our loan and appraisal contingencies. So you can see that the defaults are 17 and 21. Those are the defaults on your standard RPA. Now, of course, you can change that
Kim,
to any.
Can I jump in on that real quick? Can you
Sure.
explain when the day one starts on the countdown for those contingencies?
Oh, you want me to go all the way back to the beginning of the story? Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so when you're writing your RPA, basically, you're always writing 30 days, closing 30 days from acceptance, appraisal contingency 17 days after acceptance, et cetera. And that term, that verbiage after acceptance, basically what that means is on the day that the last signature comes in constitutes acceptance. So it may not always be the day that's on your RPA. You may have a counter that may take a day or two, et cetera, to get signed by everyone. When the last signature comes in, acceptance has occurred. The date that's on that signature is day 0, not day 1. So if you get your final signature, whether it's a counter or whether the RPA is being accepted without counter, whatever day that final signature gets stamped on there is day 0. Even if you open escrow that day, that's still day 0. So when you see this verbiage after acceptance, that means counting forward from that day 0. It's also important to recognize that those run in calendar days, not business days. So again, if you get an acceptance on a Saturday and you don't actually open escrow till Monday because the escrow office is not open on Saturday, your contract still runs from that acceptance date being day 0, not the day you opened escrow. So, and thank you for that, Tony, because sometimes I get too assumptive that people know those things. So going into our contingencies, when you talk about appraisal contingency, the default on the RPA is 17 days. The default for the loan is 21 days. Can you change them? Absolutely. I think what we're here to talk about today is, should you change them? And this is where Tony was talking about working in tandem with your lender realtor team to say, okay, Tony, what can we do here in this particular situation for this particular buyer? Every buyer is going to be different. Every loan product's different. Everybody's got these different scenarios. One thing I try to steer really, really clear of, and I see a lot of realtors trip up and do this, I try to steer really clear of making assumptions about what the lender can accomplish without actually getting that information from the lender. Even when I'm talking to my own client, well, do you think we could this? I don't know. Let's call your lender. I'm not going to make assumptions about what that lender can or can't do with that particular buyer without talking to that lender. Were you going to jump in there, Tony? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I heard lender quite a bit, so I'll jump in. Yeah, so we, we understand the chaoticness of the industry right now and how everybody is doing whatever they can to try to get their offer accepted, and we're seeing all contingencies getting shortened, right? So on our end, when we look at, and I asked him to go back to when we see the days start counting, right? Because it's important for us as we're going into an understanding that we're going to shorten contingency periods, that we're all in agreement to when that starts. Because we have a software that we plug in dates. Everybody mute yourself. Echo. So we have a software where we plug in dates, right? We get the RPA on the 1st, right? And we look at the last signed date, and if it was on the 31st, the first is going to be our day one. So we're in agreement with that. So, but as you're going into these negotiations and you're shortening these contingencies, one of the things I always tell the agents, watch what day of the week you're going in a contract, because if you're going in on a Thursday or a Friday, right, now we're delayed 3-4 days on the lending side. So that's going to give us, right, the opportunity to shorten or extend our contingency periods, because we're going to, forgive my language, we're going to be fucked if we say we're going to do a 7-day appraisal and you open escrow on Friday. There's just no way we can recover from that. So when we're looking at these appraisal and loan contingencies, which is really the two contingencies that we concern ourselves with, I'm going to talk about appraisal first. On a conventional loan and an FHA loan, we hire what's called an appraisal management company, and they're not tied to us, right? So we go into their software, we hit order appraisal, we have a panel of pre-selected appraisers within a given area that we like and we know do good work, and we vetted them out. We can't legally call them and say, hey, get us a value, or do it in this time frame, but we can go through their AMC without going directly and communicating with them and say, hey, we want an appraisal back within 4 days, 5 days. They charge us $150, but we can do it, right? Now that's the exception, not the norm. And so in order for us to even get to that point where we're going to order an appraisal, a few things need to happen. The first is I need to get the RPA. I can't tell you guys how many times I get an RPA and I'm a week in a contract, and it's like, by the way, I also shorten contingency periods to 10 days on appraisal and 14-day loan. Here's a contract a week late. There's nothing I can do at that point. So typically what we've been doing, and our team's been super great at, is telling me, hey, we got offers out, go call the listing agent. And I call the listing agent to try to solidify not only our contingencies, but our financing terms. And that helps me stay in connection, helps Brandy stay in connection with the whole transaction as we open up and we prep our team to go through the process of ordering appraisal and getting us ahead of the game and being proactive rather than reactive. So we get the contract, right? We got to go into the loan now, adjust all loan terms to reflect the contract, input our dates, and then we have to disclose. So what I mean by disclosing is we have to send an official loan estimate in which the buyer is going to get an estimation of all the loan terms, right? I no longer wait for escrow to get me fees, because that just takes too much time. So we have the escrow formulas for how much they're going to charge for escrow fees, title fees. We plug them in, we pre-populate them, and they're out. We hired a loan opener so that this can literally go out within 24 hours. You get me an RPA on a Thursday, I'm getting that out by Friday. There's been cases where I get it Thursday morning, I'm out by Thursday afternoon. The reason why is I need to get to the point to where I have the borrower sign these disclosures so I can order an appraisal. If the borrower lags on signing this loan estimate, I can't order an appraisal. Within that loan estimate, there's a document called an intent to proceed. That intent to proceed tells me, hey, the buyer is in agreement and says you can go forward to the next step. That doesn't tie them to the loan at all. My rate's not even locked at this point. It just says you got the green light to go next. Right? That's really the only time I'm held back by a signature. So buyer signs that intent to proceed. Now I can order appraisal. Right? Now, because of this, the speed factor of what we've done with our loan opener, this has given us the opportunity to say, okay, shorten these appraisal contingencies. I don't need 17 days to get an appraisal done. Typically, most lenders have this same process and they shouldn't need that 17 days. There are exceptions. Like I did a deal in San Luis Obispo that's a 5-acre manufactured home. No fucking appraiser is going to take that in this market. It took me a month to get somebody.
Mhm.
Right.
That's something I was going to say too. Sorry to jump in, Tony.
Yeah.
Is don't assume that, because the timelines that the lender has to work with are not just tied to the buyer. You might think, oh, well, the last offer we wrote or the last escrow we were in that we fell out of for whatever reason, Tony told me he could do it in 10 days. So I already know he can do that. So I'm going to write it again. No, it is not only tied to the buyer, it's tied to the type of property it is, where the property is. It's tied to, hey, maybe the lender got a little more busy this week. But the type of property, or maybe they decided to change loan products and didn't even tell you. Like they talked to the lender and thought that wasn't information that you might need. You don't know. So you have to check with them each time, not just assume because the last offer you wrote, you were good, that you're always going to be on that same time frame. Always go back and check when you're writing a new offer.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we definitely look at it on a per case basis. And to go in and finish off with conventional and FHA, and why I highlighted those two is because those run through a third-party AMC company, appraisal management company. We order the appraisal after the borrower signs the loan estimate, and they're off to do their thing. The average turn time is 7 days without any rush. If we are in a situation where we need a rush because I got the RPA late, I got busy, my loan opener got busy, our disclosure team got busy, there is a lot of chaos that can happen within that first 72 hours, 24 hours that can lead to now we're 4 or 5 days in and it's like, oh shit, we only have 5 days left. We can get a rush. It costs us $150, which is nothing, right? There's plenty of times where I just say, I'll cover that fee. Just get me my damn appraisal. Okay. And so then we go ahead and order it 7-day turn time. So in the perfect scenario, we open escrow on a Monday because we negotiated all weekend. You have the contract signed on Sunday. So day one is Monday and you'd put a 10-day contingency. Well, Tuesday, we're going to disclose. Hopefully Tuesday night they sign. And by Wednesday morning, we're ordering. We have 7 days from there, which puts us right at the 10th day, right? That's a perfect scenario. We can even do it sometimes a little faster, but that's typically the shortest. That's why I've told you guys typically do anywhere between 11 to 14. I highlighted 2 loan products, FHA and conventional, because those are just easy. Those are cookie cutters. We do those quickly. VA appraisers are ordered directly through the VA. They don't run through a third-party company. And so, just like any government agency, they're a little bit slower. That was a shot at the government. Sorry, guys. Don't need to make it political. But sorry, Kim, I don't know, you were muted. But
I said, I don't think anybody's going to be offended that you called out the government.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. So VA appraisals, minimum 10 days before we can even contact them to find out where they're at. They usually don't take longer than 10 days though. So if you have a VA deal, you're probably going to need all 17 just to be safe. You can shorten it to 14. It's just really going to depend on when you go into escrow. You open escrow on Friday, you're going to need all 17. There's just no getting around it. But you open on a Sunday or a Monday, maybe even all the way up through Wednesday, you're solid. We still have a good shot. VA appraisals, I cover for the vets up front. We don't charge them up front. All other loan products, they get a payment link. but for VA appraisals, we take care of it. It's just a part of their closing cost. So VA appraisals, I don't want to talk about this. They're pretty awesome because people are scared of VA appraisals. They're not that much. They don't go into that much more depth. The termite clearance is a big thing with VAs. But other than that, VA is the only appraisal product where if you're going to have a lower value, they actually tell you up front. Every other product, it's a reactionary drill. They just go, sorry, dude, you're under 50 grand. VA, they'll tell you, hey, go get me comps. You have 48 hours. It's called Tidewater. You got 48 hours to beat this. So that really highlights the appraisal contingency. I want to get this across, and I talked to Kim about this before. I do not have the right to remove any contingencies. So
nor do we.
Yeah.
So that's all of the client. All we're doing is generating the paperwork.
Yeah. So the only thing when the appraisal comes in, you'll get a call from me or a text message that says, hey, appraisal is in at value and is as is, which means no lender required repairs are needed. That in turn essentially gives the client the ability to waive the appraisal contingency, but you won't get anything from me that says waive appraisal. You may get a phone call because it's not in writing where I say, hey, if I was a client at this point, I'd probably waive it because the value is supported or we're in agreement with what the value is. The final thing I want to talk about appraisals is waiving appraisal contingency. All right. It is all over the board right now. I'm going to give you guys a real life example of what just happened to one of our clients, not on our team. I was a loan officer.
Hey, Tony. Hey, Tony, real quick. After you give this example, can you give an actual example of what you meant just a moment ago with the VA loan and how we can utilize the Tidewater? Give a solid example, because we are seeing a lot of what I think your next story is. So after your story, please provide something like that so it's real clear to everybody.
Okay, perfect. So I'll give a few different examples of what's happening with appraisals right now. This is the most dire. I should probably save it for the end because it's the coolest story. This has the strongest ending, but I'll start with that. So right now what you're seeing, people are waiving appraisal. Why are they waiving appraisal? Because they can just get out using loan contingency, right? They can just say, hey, their financing isn't gonna go through, so we're gonna pull out using that. I'm not a realtor, so I'm not gonna talk about whether or not that's true or not. But I can give you a real life example. Yeah, and Kim, I'll let you talk about what happens after I tell you after I give this story, you can give your perspective on it. Appraisal is waived up front. I see it. I didn't like it. Called the agent, said, dude, is this gonna appraise? Maybe, but if not, we'll pull out using financing. All right, cool. Didn't appraise, came in 20 grand under. Buyers were prepared to do 5. There was no appraisal gap talked about in the RPA, just completely waived. They decide that they're going to pull out, so they stop supporting docs. After 30 days, at some point, I got to decline the loan because of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. After 30 days, I got to make a move. And if they're not reacting, it's a forced denial. Well, turns out the sellers were attorneys. Bad move on our part, right? And I say our because I probably should have done more to stop it up front. Anyways, their EMDs held in escrow. The sellers just said, oh, cool. No, we know what you're doing. We're just not going to sign the cancellation of the contract, and we'll go open escrow at another escrow company. And your EMD is going to be tied there until we go to arbitration. That's as much as I wanted to get involved in that whole thing. So I said, cool, not my business. If you guys find another property, figure it out, let me know. I'll be here.
Contact me when the subpoena comes in for my file.
Yeah, but otherwise, I try to stay out of legal stuff, and I'll let my attorney deal with it. But otherwise, that's an extreme case. What I'm recommending is going up front with how much you're willing to cover, right? Maybe it takes a few more offers to get accepted, but at least putting in there the verbiage, hey, we're going to offer 450. The property comes in at 400. We'll give you the 10 grand. We'll guarantee that everything's negotiated up front. Salaries, I think they have to come down. I don't know if they do or not, but at least it's all in there. and we're in agreement going up front, so that if we do come in with a low appraisal, we're, we've already come to agreement, and there's no reaction, right? It's all proactive up front. It's also a lot less stressful going into this process. Otherwise, every day you're going, fuck, I hope that appraisal comes in. I hope that appraisal comes in. Right.
So I'm gonna speak to that a little bit really quick as far as how to write that the proper way. Removing the entire appraisal contingency up front with no specification is never the way to go, unless you are literally writing all cash and the buyer just doesn't care. There's any type of loan product involved, even if it's 50% down, I don't care. Never remove it entirely up front. What you're going to do, and I know I've had a lot of long conversations with a couple of the agents, Victoria is one, on how to strategize it and then how to verbiage it on the contract, is exactly what Tony said. You have to specify up front, talk to the buyer and find out what they're truly comfortable with. How much gap are you comfortable with? 10 grand, 20, 50? It could be $1 million home. 50 grand isn't a big gap at that price point. They might very happily write that check. So it's all about what they're comfortable with. Then what you have to do, if you want to really make that offer stick, if the listing agent's not an idiot and actually looks for it, what you then want to do is attach a proof of funds for that amount of cash, because it's toilet paper if they don't even have the money. If they're saying, well, yeah, we'll pay 20 grand, and then you find out they got $500 in the bank, now you have another legal situation, because just because they can't close doesn't mean they didn't legally agree to. So now you have another arbitration where that EMD is going to sit in escrow. I have $100,000 in EMDs sitting at signature in escrow from the past 2 years from arbitrations that are waiting to happen. They're just sitting there. You don't want that, especially if you're talking about VA FHA, and that EMD is, they already scraped that EMD up, right? Now it's going to sit in escrow while they don't have another EMD to put down somewhere. So always tie that appraisal guarantee to a number that you have talked about with the buyer very extensively, and that they have proof of funds for. Never just waive it entirely unless you're literally writing all cash.
Cool. Yeah. Not on the loan side, we can tell you hey, they can cover 10, 20 G's because we're looking at their whole financial picture, right? And there's cases where even if they can cover the 10,000, it doesn't mean they should.
Right.
Just there's affordability and there's qualification. Just because you can qualify for it doesn't mean you can afford it. So, be conscious of that. Is really right now is just working in tandem to push things forward together, and really being in that type of communication to say, hey, this is what they really do feel comfortable with. This is what they do not, because then you don't want to run into a situation where we just cost the buyer, right, 10 grand, and it took them 6, 7. For us, it's one transaction. For them, it's 10 years of savings, right? So we don't want to be in that position. Again, I'm not a realtor, so I'm not going to, if you come to me and you say, I'm going to waive appraisal, I'm going to give you my opinion, and that's as much as I can do.
You're going to tell them to call me.
Then it's on you. Then it's on you.
Tell them to call me before they do that mess.
Yeah, and but we'll work together. I've gone as far as a low appraisal as cutting my pay. I did it on Indira's deal recently, where I just said, hey, screw it. I'll cut $5 grand off their closing costs to help bridge that gap. That gives them $5 grand to go towards bridging that appraisal gap, right? Because the difference of what they're going to pay, we can't put into the loan. Our loan to value, if they're going to do 5% down, our loan to value is going to start at the appraised value. So if they're going to do 5,000 over, that gets added to their down payment requirement. Okay. And then Victoria, you wanted an example of a VA Tidewater?
Yes. So so you kind of made an example of, so if you don't mind, give more of a detailed example regarding VAs, VA appraisals, and how we can manage those, and there's more advantageous opportunity.
Yeah. So with VA, if the appraiser is having trouble finding comparables to support the value, they're going to initiate Tidewater, which is essentially our signal that says, hey, you have 48 hours to get this appraisal comparables that are going to support the listing, the sales price. So you have a property that's 500, right? It was listed 500, you offered 550. Appraiser's like, dude, I can only get 500. Tell me how you got 550. Now we have to go back to the listing side and the buyer's agent, right? In a different market, this is the listing agent's job. But right now, because it's a seller's market, it becomes our job. The buyer side has to now scramble to find enough comparables to support that 550 and provide me with a market analysis, not just, I'll get a link to two Zillow pending offers within that price point. I'm like, dude, I can't use this. This isn't even closed. So I got to get a full market analysis. I've gotten some that are down to like how they calculated the price of square foot based on closed historical data.
Closed only.
Yeah. So if you get, let's just say during this escrow process, the neighbor's house closed and they were 50 grand above market. That's a perfect comparable that maybe the appraiser didn't use to be able to support that value. And I know, Kim, you get involved when we have these Tidewaters.
Yeah.
And Kim will send over, pretty good breakdown as far as, hey, here are the closed transactions that support the value.
Correct. So going back to what Tony said, this isn't like, sometimes when you guys ask me for comps, because you're going on a listing appointment and I send you like a link with 5 comps, because I know you're all intelligent enough to, sometimes I'll get on the phone, have a little conversation with you or put a couple notes in there, but you don't need like a full blown, final exam paper on the comps, because that's us. And if you have a question, you'll call me or text me. That's not what we do when we're fighting an appraisal. When we're fighting an appraisal, I've written like 7-page reports about 3 comps. I'm taking that appraisal report on the subject property and I'm going into every little detail and I'm looking to debunk anything in there that I can. Whether they sometimes they get the whole specs of the property wrong to jump off. So that right there discredits, gives me a lot of leeway to discrediting the whole thing. Or especially when you get into areas that are less cookie cutter, like Fallbrook or Valley Center, they go out way too far. I've seen appraisals. I won one, got it up from 450 to 505 because they had used comps in Valley Center for Fallbrook, which is obviously idiotic. So you're writing a full-blown report. I have some examples that I can send you, and I have sent some of you in the past when you've needed them. And I will sit with you and work with you on it, because it cannot just be, oh, here's some comps. It doesn't work like that. You won't win that. I have about a 50% win rate with Tidewaters, and that's actually, I know it's 50% is an F, but most people don't win Tidewaters like ever. We have about a 50% overturn rate on bad Tidewaters. And it's because of how detailed I get in. They really can't argue with it at that point.
Yeah.
So
the more detail you put into it, the more the appraiser is going to be able to use that to validate their increase in value, right? Because if they so you put yourself in the appraiser's position, if they get audited, they have to now prove to the auditor why they came up with that value. So if they say, well, look, I initiated Tidewater and I got this comp from Zillow, that's probably not going to work.
no.
But he pulls out a 4-page, 7-page report that says, here are all the different items that they've identified to support this value. Well, now you got a leg to stand on. A couple examples come to mind. One is my personal home. My appraisal came in 25K under. I dissected it with Doc, and then I was like, hey, dude, they didn't even give us credit for solar that's been fully paid. So we went back to the appraiser. We said, hey, solar's fully paid. I got my 20, and solar's worth 25K. So I got my 25K. I got my appraised value up from 520 to 545. So there's always things that we're going to look for to try to identify where they're coming at. Now, a lot of times you're going to know up front if this isn't going to appraise, right? You get Tidewater and you know it's not going to appraise. Let's just take the value and react. But if you know there's a fighting chance, we got to put in that work
Definitely.
The other example is, remember that property in San Diego with that old couple? We had an appraisal come in like 100 grand under, and we fought that pretty hard to the point where we had a second appraisal done, and that is not the norm. That is the exception. And that was a conventional file. That's why we were able to do that.
Tony, I
Oh,
don't know if I
that's-
can, I'm sorry to interrupt you both. I wanted to see if I could jump in really quickly just to give an example of something that I just dealt with all of this yesterday, and I think it applies to Colby. You know, we got on the phone yesterday in a three-way call with the buyer to go over, you know, we understood that there were offers coming in, well, like 40, 50 grand above the list price. And we were discussing that. So even, you know, we're having this meeting right now to understand contingencies, and this is our job. I think it's really important to make sure that the buyer understands what a contingency is and exactly what that means, because even in the conversation where we were breaking it down and I was having the conversation and asking them, are you comfortable with this? And we had an entire conversation, and at the end of it, she's like, well, wait, what's a contingency? Like, what does that mean? So I realized we had to, like, you know, Kim, you said start from the beginning of the story. You really have to break it down, because who knows we don't even know what a contingency is when we first get into this industry, and this is our job. So,
Right.
and it's really important just to make sure that they understand, because having that conversation up front, like you said, Kim, making sure they understand that they have to have the money, what that means, making sure that they understand that the loan doesn't cover anything beyond what it covers, right? What the appraisal comes in at. And I mean, it was eye-opening for me in that conversation, and I was happy to break it down for them the way that we did. But it was just, like I said, eye-opening to really understand how much people don't understand, and what our job is to make sure that they do understand going in before, as we're writing the offer. I mean, as you're writing the offer.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Yeah, I think, you know, it is easy with both junior agents and clients to get assumptive that they understand what things mean. As we all know, and it's important to make sure that our buyers know, even our sellers. I even see it on the seller side when the seller says, well, they're past their 17 days. That means we can kick them, right? No, that means we can send them an MVP. Well, then if they don't respond to the MVP and they fall out, we get to keep their deposit, right? No, you don't. We see this a lot with people that have done business, you know, maybe sold a home in another state, because other states are that way. California is pretty much the most buyer-centric state in terms of its real estate laws anywhere in the country. There are states where if you pass 17 days or whatever it is, and you don't lift that contingency, not only you're booted and you lose your deposit. And there is no active contingency where you have to remove it in writing. So people don't understand this stuff. It's very important, as both Brandy and Tony said, to not get assumptive that people do understand it.
Yeah. We'll again, we'll always work together to try to get this across, to get the message across.
Well, and then Kim, do you think that after, because I know you guys have probably a plan of what you wanted to talk about, do you think
Not
that
really.
Kim? No, okay. Well,
No.
one thing I think that would be really helpful is, now that hopefully, and you know, let's make sure the team understands everything that you guys are saying. One of the things that I know that we consistently run into on the buy side is that, you know, sellers agents, for whatever reason, we've seen this happen, still stand by this appraisal and removing this appraisal contingency. So how, as a senior agent, do we help, number one, educate the seller's agent that, hey, okay, that doesn't really matter, without sounding like big bitches, right? And then two, is there a way that we can preempt these appraisals in a different way when we're putting an offer in, to try to like secure the deal more? Like, I don't know, like, let's say, you know what I mean? Like, what can we do to say, hey, we're smarter than the rest of these guys, and here's what we're going to do?
The best way is what we've discussed earlier, which is setting a limit on what your buyer is able and willing and comfortable to do, and writing that in. And I know you and I had a good conversation about this a week or so ago, writing that directly into your RPA, and then call or text or email that listing agent. And because you you can't be assumptive with them either, believe me.
Yep.
You can't assume that they're going to understand what that verbiage even truly deeply means. Get on the phone. If they don't answer the phone, I know I'm terrible about it, but if you text me, I'm going to read it and I'm going to respond, right? Listing agents are freaking buried right now. Communicate with them directly in some way, even if you have to put it in the body of the email and truly explain what it means. Not in a I'm talking down to you way, but in a like, just want to make sure we're on the same page. This is what my buyer's willing to do. Here's where the verbiage is referencing that. But that is the best and most proactive way that you can go into your offer phase with, ensuring that you're strengthening your offer, but you're not giving away all of your buyers' get out of jail cards. Does that make sense? There really isn't another better way to do it, I don't believe, than that.
Okay. And I think the other thing too is we all need to be very cognizant and stay on top of comps and stuff, because that really is how you're going to be able to help to put an offer together to understand what the offer should really look like. And I mean, honestly, I've talked to listing agents where they know damn well. I mean, they'll say out loud, like, yeah, this guy came in at 550. There's no way in hell it's appraising for that. It's coming in at 525, but hey, they're willing to cover the difference. So it's not that they don't know, but I know that, do you think that the appraisers have come up in the market whereby, like last year we were talking about how difficult it was for them to, get closer to what we're seeing?
Yeah, I think, and Tony, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm not an appraiser or a lender, but I think what we've seen is when the market first sort of caught fire, and we've seen this in other cycles when this has happened in the past, when the market first sort of catches fire, when you're in that, especially the first 90-day window, because they're pulling 90-day comps, when you're inside of that first 90-day window, or even in certain neighborhoods, depending on turnover rates in different areas, in that first 6-month window, they're truly not able to find comps. They're only allowed to make so much allowance for market activity, especially when that market activity could be a blip. It's not really a trend yet. Now we're like a year into the market being this way. Now they're able to more honestly say, okay, because they're actually allowed on the appraisal report to make an allowance for, supply and demand market activity. They're able to more honestly use that now, because it's opinion and they don't have to use it, or they don't have to not use it. They're able to more honestly use that, because it's been a whole ass year of this, right? Now it's a thing. It's not a 2-month, oh, COVID was weird and we don't know what's happened there. There was a radar blip. This has been a whole year of this. So they're able to much more honestly say, hey, look, this is what the market's doing. We all know it. You don't even have to be in the industry to know what's going on. It's just where we're at. And two, of course, they're able to, 90-day comps for days. So yes, I think we're still going to see it, because buyers are just consistently just offering these absurd, but it's not as bad on appraisals as it was 9 months ago.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So you will see some appraisers, a good one at least, is going to include market trends on there, 3 to 5% increase, just to try to get close to the value. I think generally we're still seeing them come in just a tad bit short, and but we are starting to see. I've had my first couple where they came in under. I just had an appraisal come in like $206,000 under. I'm sorry, over the list price. So my buyer, 3.5% down, now has almost 18% in equity. Talk about that listing agent screwing over her sellers.
Yeah. Was that a Zillow listing or something?
It was a Zillow pocket listing. No, a rural area. So.
Okay.
Yeah. And we went in thinking we were going to be short too. So everybody was all screwed up on that. But 200 grand under, I mean, that was just insane.
That's pretty sick.
Yeah, I'm going to refi them in 6 months. It's great for me.
Yeah, no shit. So now that we know that we are not going to leave appraisals, right? We're not going to remove contingencies, and we are going to cap our appraisals. What else can we do in our contingency processes that we can bring to our clients that others can't, Tony and Brandy?
Yeah. So the other part is the loan, right? The loan contingency is how, when is the loan going to be fully approved? So the loan contingency typically gets removed after we have initial underwriting approval. So when we get an underwriter's approval, that's not a final approval. That just means an underwriter has reviewed the file and said, hey, we agree, and they give us our final list of conditions. So when you think of our loan process, we're building this giant, like 50 to 100, sometimes 1,000-piece puzzle, right? And there's cases where it's a 4-piece puzzle. And so every loan is going to be completely different because everybody's finances are like their fingertips. It's unique to them. And so, ooh, that was good. I'm going to remember that. Sorry, guys. Sometimes I'm happy with my analogies. All right. So there's going to be points in this loan contingency where I always get this text, can we remove loan? And then you get a text message from me that says, hey, I can't authorize removal of loan contingency. That's up to the buyer. What I can tell you is we have an underwriting approval and we have either collected conditions or we're collecting conditions. There will be times where I'll call you and I'll tell you, hey, I wouldn't remove loan contingency until we have clear to close because this is a rocky deal. You know, if I'm doing a VA manual underwrite and I'm covering closing costs and it's just a loan where I'm pulling teeth to get it through the finish line, you know, I probably wouldn't risk the client's EMD because if you remove loan contingency, generally you've already removed all other contingencies. And so now you're risking their EMD. But again, that's not up to me, you know, and it's not up to the realtor on the other side. It's really up to the buyer whether or not they want to risk their EMD, because at that point, if I understand this correctly, there's nothing else protecting them. For the loan contingency, we are definitely shortening them. We hired a bunch of underwriters at APM. So we're getting loans underwritten in about 12 to 15 days. So I'm usually saying shorten that loan contingency to 17 days and we'll get it through the funnel pretty quickly. If it's a 4-piece puzzle and the underwriter approves the loan, maybe even up to like a 20, 30, 40, 50-piece puzzle, and we feel comfortable with it, you know, we'll always get on the phone with the buyer, say, hey, you know, you're approaching your loan contingency. Here's where your loan approval is at. We've collected conditions. We're in resubmittal, or, you know, hey, we're at this point. In my experience, your loan is probably going to close, you know, unless something crazy happens, like you buy a car, which happens all the time. Not all the time, but it happens. You lose your job, something out of the norm happens, then you're at risk of losing your EMD. But if everything stays structurally sound in your financial picture, you know, you're probably pretty safe, right? So then I kind of give them this reassurance without telling them, hey, go remove it. But I give them this reassurance, hey, I got your back. You know, we're probably green light to closing. But again, you know, just there is that exception where we're going to try to hold that contingency as hard as we can, and we'll take the notice to perform, and we're going to go in. Usually we go into these deals knowing, hey, we're going to have a rough escrow, but this is what we do. I mean, sometimes we have rough escrows, right? And, you know, what I found is the most important piece when we're getting to this is how much communication we've had with the listing agent. If we've been on top of it with the listing agent, telling them where we're at in the process, they usually don't give us grief. But if it's something where we're reacting and all of a sudden we need an extension on it, I will get pushback. So we try our best to communicate with both sides throughout the process. But I just wanted to get this point across. You know, again, you're never going to get this from one of my lenders. Another lender can do whatever the fuck they want, but you're never going to get it from me or one of my lenders. Remove all contingencies. It's just not going to happen. We got to talk to the buyer, educate the buyer, let them make the decision. But
Okay, so Tony, on that topic, okay, so let's say you've got a buyer who's got great credits, like you feel comfortable, like in the 800s, you know, they're in a good position. Their biggest problem is they just can't get an offer accepted for whatever reason, right? Would that be a scenario where you could do something in the beginning where we could somehow get that information to underwriting so that it's already pre-approved via underwriting, and then only remove the loan contingency and leave the appraisal and the inspection still in place?
Yeah, so we have the ability to do TBD underwrite, so to be determined, for a subject property, and we'll underwrite the entire file. And the entire file will have a full approval. All the financing is done, given, you know, up-to-date pay stubs, bank statements, whatever it may be, and the property qualifies for a loan. So we do have that ability. I think we're going to do that with one of your buyers right now, Victoria. I would stress that right now, it's not the norm for us to do it. It would have to be a situation. It's a situational. It's got to be on a per case basis, right? Because I have to convince an underwriting staff that's extremely slammed to look at a file that doesn't have a property tied to it, and there's nothing tying the buyer. We can do all this work, and then the buyer can go to, you know, Loan Depot afterwards or whatever, because they were giving them a $30 discount on their closing costs. So I have to now sell the story on the back office to say, hey, look at this loan because of XYZ. We would hope that us underwriting it creates a stickiness factor to the client. But, you know, in your situation, absolutely, clients getting frustrated, we're at risk of losing the deal. Let's do the extra work, get it a TBD underwrite. It's going to take you a week or two to get through the funnel, because that's not a priority now. You're going to have, it's a favor that the underwriting staff is going to do for us, but they'll underwrite the file. It may take a week, it may take 2 weeks. As long as everybody's patient with that process, you will have a full loan approval. Now, again, I'm not going to tell you to release loan contingency. The only thing I can tell you is the financing is approved. Removing loan contingency, that's completely up to you.
So I want to talk about that from a realtor and RPA contract perspective. I'm pretty sure I know which one of Victoria's buyers you're referring to. And Victoria can tell me if I'm not right about this, but this is a very specific situation.
Yeah.
Where this buyer has a very large cash reserve. And so it can make sense for them.
Yeah.
This would scare me a lot, because they could still lose that job in that 30 days, right? And I'm assuming, Tony, if you guys are doing a immediate underwrite like that, you're probably asking for employer letters and stuff like that, but you still don't know. That doesn't contractually bind the employer to keep employing them, right? It's just saying that they're confident that they're going to keep employing them. So there's still things that I still would, most 99.9% of the time, never recommend that you go into an offer with no loan contingency. The only way I would, that buyer has a very specific type of situation that is very unusual. And that's why I'm here and Tony's here for you guys to come talk to us and Brandy about these specific situations, because they come up. But you know, I wouldn't tell you to do that with an FHA buyer that works at FedEx and like, this is all the cash they have in this EMD. I think that's extremely risky. That is probably going to work out fantastic for this buyer, with little to no risk in the grand scheme of things on their part. So that's where we have all these tools in our toolbox as both realtors and lenders, and not every tool is right for every situation or every buyer, every house, every deal. And that's why we all work together to find the right tool. So a hammer, it could be a $500 hammer, the best freaking hammer in the world, but I'm not going to use it to fix my windshield. It's not what it's for.
Yeah.
So we need to look at our entire toolbox, be aware of all the tools we have, and then look at each situation and choose what's going to be the best tool for this particular situation.
Yeah. And to caveat off of what Kim was saying, on those TBDs, we use it in that situation. We can also use it on a really dirty file where you do have a client who's like on the brink of qualifying, and for as good as I am, I can say, fuck, let's roll the dice. I don't know, 50-50. We can then say, well, let's not roll the dice during the escrow process. Let's just get it fully underwritten.
Right. And sorry, go ahead, Tony.
No, I was just going to say the biggest thing with that is the buyer's got to be willing to play ball, right? The buyer's got to be willing to do all the work up front with there's really no excitement because there's no property.
Right. Well, and I think that's a great tool to have to use on its own. I love that tool to send with an offer, but that still doesn't necessarily mean you remove the loan contingency on that offer. Having that from the lender still strengthens the hell out of that offer. Because the listing agent's going to look at that and say, okay, at least I can be 99% confident that the lender has fully looked at this buyer. Unlike, I could go on quicken.com and get a pre-qual printed out on toilet paper. And that's especially going to happen. And I got no shame. I'll use myself as an example. I make a lot of money, but I have marginal credit. So I could go on Quicken on one of these internet engines and put in my info, and on the face of it, I'm going to get approved for way more than what I would ultimately wind up getting approved for when that winds up at underwriting. And listing agents know that. So when they see a TBD, an upfront DU like that, it gives them a ton more confidence in the ability of that loan to close. It still doesn't mean we check the no loan contingency box, guys. That's taking it too far.
Yep. Cool. So, yeah, I mean, those are the two big contingencies that we're working off of. And, that's close of escrows. If you got a clean buyer, right, we've done a lot of work up front. We have all docs are responsive. We can smash on a loan, get it done in 21 to 25 days, right? So as we're shortening all the contingencies, right, we can shorten that last one. And, right now, as this sounds a little dirty, but if everything's done up front, clear, and then we end up in a situation where closing is delayed a day or two, I really don't get a lot of pushback, right, from the listing side. If I'm on a 21-day close, and even when I talk to the listing agents, I say, dude, we're going to shoot for 21. It may take me 23 to 25 days. Definitely won't take me 30, but we're going to shoot for that 21. But I want some grace if I end up pushing out 2-3 days, because things happen on our side too. My funder threw out her back, and now my same day fundings are all fucked up. So that's out of my control. Now I'm dealing with corporate funders, and it's not the same, because just like, I'm gonna throw the government again, just like the government, corporate doesn't do the same type of work that if it's something that's localized and controlled by us. Because when it's localized, and it's just a little bit more personal. And I can email my funder and say, dude, do me this favor. I got you on breakfast the next day, right? And they're gonna throw my stuff. I haven't, sorry guys. I don't bribe them. I should say that. I don't bribe them with Starbucks, but I do send it to them. But anyways, that gives me the ability to do same day fundings. Right now, my fundings went from 1 day to 2 to 3 days. But hey, I have a deal for my cousin right now where I'm like, dude, I'm not going to make the close of escrow. I got docs out this weekend, but I'm probably going to need a day or two. But we've smashed all the way to this point. It's easy to navigate. Otherwise, I mean, shorten these contingencies, work with us, with Brandy and I, and Eddie, I don't know if Eddie's still on, but work with us, talk to us about the client. We'll give you the roadmap for a successful transaction, for a smooth process, and we'll do our best to try to meet all these contingency periods. The one thing I can guarantee you is that as we get to closer to these contingency periods, if I need an extension, you'll get it from us up front. You'll never get to the day of and you're like, oh shit, where's my appraisal? We'll have let you know we had an issue, right? Otherwise, let's just work together. That's the biggest thing. Let's just work together to get these offers accepted, contingencies cleaned up. And I don't know, Kim, if you got anything else. Is that Chris with no shirt on in the background? Nice.
No, I mean, I think we pretty much covered it. And I think as a final point, as a closing point, it's difficult. It's not difficult. It can be difficult, especially if you're a little bit newer. I've never done your job. I'm not a lender. I've been doing this for 4 years, but I've never been a lender. And you don't do our job. So I think when you can come to an understanding of what the process is for the other people trying to get your deal closed with you, and that's what I love about kind of our relationship and us working together. Because I think there's a lot of people that love to throw the lender under the bus. And then you see a lot of lenders that love to throw the realtors under the bus. And I think when we all sort of understand what each other's back end processes are more deeply, we are better equipped to educate our clients, and we're better equipped to work together in a productive way. Instead of just saying like, well, why didn't they order the appraisal yet? Well, they've got to disclose first. And you accepted your offer on frickin' Saturday. So we wouldn't think about those things unless you said them to us. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll open it up for questions for you guys. That was solid. Thanks, Kim. Thanks for doing this with us.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have questions? Oh, what's up, Cheyenne? You just got your hair done? Congratulations.
I'll play with me, Tony. Thank you, though.
Congratulations, though.
I've been cooking. I'm sorry. I didn't want you guys to see all that, but I've been listening.
Okay, nice. We'll send you a quiz.
Oh, yes, do that. No, trust me. This was a really good class, and I missed like a little bit of it in the beginning, but this is something that I think we all need to know, especially like newer agents, so I'm looking forward to the next one.
All right. Yeah. Do you guys have is there anything you guys want to learn for the next one? Nope. Go ahead.
Next year or something.
Yeah. Get with the interns and oh, wait, you're no longer an intern, right? Because you're full-fledged.
No, but those are still my dogs. So we'll be getting together still.
All right. Get with them. Let me know what you guys need next. All right. If there's no other questions, have a great weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Kim.
Hey,
Appreciate you guys.
All right, guys. Peace out, y'all. Go south.
Thank you, guys.
Houses.
Thank you,
Peace out,
guys.
y'all.
That was
Thanks,
really
Kim.
great.
Appreciate it. All right. That was it.